Singleton. I am a senior project manager with the National Training and Technical Assistance Center, and I am going to just do a couple of introductions and opening slides for us to get started, and then we will jump right into our 90-minute session today called Healing Centered Engagement, Placing Wellness at the Center of Service. That's powerful. That's we're going to get into some good stuff today, y'all. So as a quick disclaimer, this presentation is prepared for INTAC under a cooperative agreement with SAMHSA. The material and the information that we're sharing today, it is representative of our presenters and not necessarily that of SAMHSA. Today's session, it will be recorded. So if you like to listen to replays and reruns, we'll share with you the link of the presentation so you can listen to it again and share it with your colleagues and friends and network. As a quick session security memo, if there are any session security issues and we have to stop the recording in the session, we will send you all information on how to rejoin. But hopefully, if you're around some wood, let's knock on it. That won't be an issue for us today. Again, I want to just quickly give a shout out to all of our partners at INTAC. We work with a lot of folks from all across the nation to bring sessions like this to you all today. If you're not a part of our listserv, if you would please join our listserv so that you don't miss any of these training sessions. And I know Oriana and Falilah, you all are going to share your slides in just a second. We will be able to show you all some of the partners that we work with on a slide here in just a moment. But as we're pulling that up, I also want to let you all know that we provide a lot of different services. In addition to this training format, we have podcast series that are coming out soon. We create infographics and all sorts of resources. And we even have a national summit, a virtual summit that's coming up in May. I know it's January. May is a long ways from now, but it'll be here before you know it. So, and that's all at no cost to you all. A lot of times these types of trainings, the registration fees can be really expensive, but we provide these opportunities to you all with no cost. So please make sure that you join us for all the things that we have available. We do provide a certificate of completion for this event. If you're interested in that certificate, you can send an email to Joanne Bloom. We'll make sure that you have her email address so you can request that certificate. You can also, again, we're going to give you a recording, the presentation slide deck, all that good stuff. And let's see, are we able to, oh, okay, let's make sure that we're able to have the slides shared. Let's see here as we get ready for this awesome opportunity and presentation. I want to also share with you all that this month is Mental Wellness Month. You all are probably already aware of that. Every Wednesday, we've been sending you all a Wellness Wednesday newsletter, and we are all focused on making sure we're taking care of our physical, spiritual, mental wellness. And we all know that wellness is more than just the absence of maybe being ill, but wellness is also about just feeling good and having peace of mind. And so this month we have different sessions. Today you all are here with us, but in next week we're going to have some session on mindful movement. We'll have a trained yoga trained yoga facilitator there to do some mindful movement for practitioners on the go. We have a session called Looking Beyond Therapy that looks into holistic wellness and different practices that you all maybe want to put into place with the people that you serve. And we also have a session on manifesting your wellness journey. We're going to do a virtual vision board, and I'll be helping to facilitate that session of a virtual vision board. So if you enjoy talking about wellness and learning about wellness, we encourage you to register for all of the events that we have this month. And I see there's a request to put a link in the chat. We'll drop that link in the chat so you can register for those. So with that being said, I am going to pass the mic over to our fabulous and wonderful presenters here to introduce themselves, Oriana and Falilah. I'm so excited to hear what you all have to share. I'll pass the mic over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry for the bumpy start with the slides. Hopefully we can all just take a breath. I am now that we can see the screen and we're up. So my name is Oriana Ides. I'm a TA specialist with NTAC, specifically supporting school-based services and the coordination of different networks and supports that coordinate services for young people and their families. Prior to this work, I was a longtime teacher, and I am also currently a therapist in community centers serving transitional age young folks. In addition to that, I am a parent, and I join you from Oloniland, unceded Oloniland, also referred to as Oakland, California. I'm so excited to be in co-facilitation with Falilah Bilal, and I'll hand it over to her to introduce herself.
Thank you, Oriana, and thank you for sharing the slides. And she's also a tech master and wizard as well. Greetings, everyone. Happy Thursday. My name is Falilah Aisha Bilal. I use she, her pronouns. Currently, I work at a place called the Black Organizing Project in Oakland, California. I am their interim chief of staff. But I am a drama therapist by trade. I have for a long time now, y'all. I'm in my 50s. Worked on behalf of youth and families, creating radical healing modalities. I work a lot in the field around confronting and hoping to end gender-based violence. I've run a couple of organizations in the Bay Area that works with commercially sexually exploited children. I've done work in the prison system. I myself have also been incarcerated for a very short period of time, but it is part of my story. I also do coaching, professional coaching for nonprofit professionals. I'm part of the Healing Centered theory and strategy in terms of the work I've done for years on behalf of young people and families. I, like my sister Oriana, am also a mom, and I just recently moved to the Mount Shasta area. And so I'm no longer living in the Bay Area. I live by this beautiful, amazing mountain that I get to look at every day. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here. That music was jamming. We invite you to get comfortable, but also like move your body as you're learning and engaging with this information. Very important to stay in movement. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited about this content and about this experience.
Thank you. So Falilah and I have thought quite a bit around what we want to offer in terms of facilitation, theory, experience. And with that said, we also want to welcome into the space your wisdom, your lived experience, your wondering. So we just want to call attention to the chat function of Zoom and say that this is a function we really hope we're able to use and be in organic, comfortable, honest dialogue with one another. And so to kick that off, some of us have already introduced ourselves, but not everyone had arrived, right? And so it's really important, I think, in building safety and trust and that we introduce ourselves once again, now that maybe the mass of us are here and present. So intentional, creating this container that we'll be in for the next 90 minutes. If you could find the chat once again and share who you are, where you're located, the roles that you play in caring for others, and maybe if you can, what brings you to this space today. So if you could offer that as introduction, and also take a moment to just scroll through who we're in community with. I say that the pandemic has stolen so much from us, but one of the really beautiful gifts in it is that we can connect across space in a way that we weren't as accustomed to prior. So just leaning into that positive reframe. And I am scrolling to see who is here with us.
Such a beautiful group of folks. Want to make sure y'all can hear us. I see a couple of messages that there were sound issues. I'll make sure to mute myself when I'm not speaking. I could have been causing that because I was off mute.
Can folks hear me? Yeah, I also want to make sure that we're all heard. My volume is as loud as it goes, so. Beautiful, beautiful. If there are any tech issues, please reach out. And thank you for, yes, in addition to the chat, please also use reactions. That's a lovely way to be in conversation and affirmation with one another. Falilah and I have a lot of questions that we're posing, opportunity for inquiry, right? And so whatever you feel comfortable with as we proceed, we'd love to see in the chat. And we're still rolling in. We've got Florida, Arizona, California, New Jersey. Yeah, incredible work you are all doing. Sacramento, lovely. Lovely. So, as I said, today's focus topic is really uplifting principles and the incredible healing benefit of healing-centered engagement. In order to do this, we believe deeply that it is important that we slow down. We are all, I believe, working within institutions and organizations that require so much from us. And so we really have to signal to our bodies and to our minds that we're slowing down together. And only through slowing down can we feel into the beauty of these practices that we're offering.
And so today we are here with some very clear objectives and goals. We want you to, at the end of this webinar, to be able to understand what healing-centered engagement is. There's a whole body of scholarly research and information about this for you to read. There is a shift that's happening within our field to really center healing and wellness at the root of how we engage with others, right? We're going to be exploring some implementation strategies, like how do we do this? What is the practice, right? We want you to spend time examining your personal and institutional impact. So really looking at how institutions impact how we have practices within our work, looking at your personal life and how who you are, how that has impact on your service provision. We want to amplify lived experience. We know that you can't give what you don't have. And it doesn't mean that we all have to come to this work from our own place of trauma, but we think it's very important to amplify what your lived experience is and how to use that to actually be at the forefront of delivering service. And then lastly, our goal is to help enhance your job satisfaction. We matter. We are important. How we feel about the work that we're doing matters. And so we're hoping that this webinar will help you on your journey to enhancing how you feel about what you do.
In the spirit of trauma-informed practices, we want to just kind of give you a brief overview of how we hope to spend our time together today. So we're deep in the welcome and grounding right now. We want to take some time to really take note of, take stock of the values that we hold dear, and our experience in working in institutions that may or may not have similar values to us. So what is our current experience in the work that we are doing? How do we relate to it? And then we'll offer some framework around shifting from sites of trauma, trauma-inducing sites, trauma-reactive sites, to sites of healing, and then explore in small group, through collective journaling, what a humanizing partnership and community care can look like for us, our unique beings, in action, and then some closing and integration. And so, as I said, I think we'll say this many times today, this is an opportunity to slow down. And this is an opportunity to sync, our mind and our body and our spirit and our heart. This is an opportunity to glean the wisdom from our bodies. So in honoring that, in shifting from head to body, we invite you to just drop your shoulders, however you hope, or however you can engage in the next 30 seconds with returning to your body some. It might be a deep exhale. It might be finding some comfort in your seat so that your breath flows a little more freely. You unclench your jaw, your belly. I hold a lot of tension in my thighs as I'm sitting here. Just notice where you're holding and what you can release, what you can soften. You ask your body what it needs right now. If there's tension or holding, can you give it a bit of movement? We reach to the sky. Maybe cat-cow in your seat. Whatever your body needs for you to feel settled and present and open and safe. If you have water near you, I invite you to take a sip of it. Extend gratitude this morning to something that has supported your wellness, something that has made being present here possible for you.
I hope you all took advantage of that time, that moment just to ground. A lot of times we forget that we have access to our breath at all times, especially in stressful moments, right? So we invite you to continue that practice of breathing and stretching, especially as we're in this co-hybrid world of being in person, but also being on the computer. So as we get started, as we ground ourselves, we have to recognize and acknowledge the land. In the Bay Area, which is where I'm from, we want to acknowledge the native folks from that land. Um, this area is a very, very special area, as all of the North American lands are. We know that our native brothers and sisters um, have been colonized. We know that their land has been taken from them. We know that there are over 500 broken treaties that speak to the relationship between Native Americans and the US government. And we just want to take a moment to acknowledge the original people of this land. We know that they continue to fight to be stewards and caretakers of this land, and we are so grateful for them. The area that I'm in the Mount Shasta area, it's the Karuk Native folks and the Winnemay-Wintu. I salute them. I salute not just their struggle for land stewardship, but I salute the continued practice of their traditions, the power of their people, and the love and care that they have given and continue to give, even in the midst of the genocide and of the trauma that they have experienced. Ashe, Native folks. If you want to find out more information, please go to the link nativeland.ca for California, and I believe you can find it for your state as well, and begin to lift up the names and the cultures of the Native folks from your area. Ashe. Secondly, we'd like to do a labor acknowledgement. We know that this country has gone through many changes, but we would not be the country that we are if it was not for the labor of the enslaved Africans and their descendants who have suffered through tremendous systematic oppression We are indebted to the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants and their sacrifice. And we have to acknowledge that labor and the residuals of violence and trauma that impacts that community, my community, our community as we go forward. So we say ashe to those folks that built this country for free and that are still impacted by systematic oppression. Ashe. And
Sure.
I have to acknowledge at this moment, these two slides were created by an amazing woman and from the Bay Area. Her name is Christina Cria Gomez. And this was something that she created and she allows us to share. If these are slides you'd like to use, you can email me. And these are free slides that she shares with anyone that wants to begin to do land and labor acknowledgements. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, and maybe if you feel inclined to find the chat and share what this moment of settling into your body has provided you, what this moment of settling into the land may be providing you, just so a word or two of the wisdom, the information that is coming through you with this intentional opportunity to settle in. Thank you. Peace. Thank you. Stillness, calmer, more focused. Yes. Less dispersed. I love that. Quiet, clarity, connection, stability, gratitude. Safe. We deserve this. We absolutely deserve this. Beautiful. So, as we said a bit earlier, as we were going through the agenda, we thought it was really important before offering this really beautiful framework to kind of sit with and notice what we're currently holding, and the organizational value and culture we're existing within now. And so, in doing so and starting that conversation, we want to offer these words by Rachel Rahman. She writes in The Cost of Caring. I'm going to read it out loud. I invite you to read it yourself as well. And then we'll, in the chat, just notice what words stand out to us. Maybe we can find a string of 2 or 3 words that are resonating with us or that are sticking or lingering. So the expectation that we can be immersed in the suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to walk through water without getting wet. This sort of denial is no small matter. We burn out not because we don't care, but because we don't grieve. We burn out because we're allowed our hearts to become so filled with loss that we have no room left to care. So as I read these words, as you read them to yourself, I invite you to think about the way in which you relate to your work now, the cultures within your organization, your experience as service providers, as caretakers. What resonates with you? I invite you to share that in the chat. Grief is my best friend.
I was just about to lift that up. That is so, and it's such an important piece of our human experience. So thank you, Tara, for sharing that.
Yeah, and as I read it, I wonder, I just imagine the hard work, that it took to be able to really be friends and value grief. Many of our initial responses or reactions to push it away, to ignore it, to move past it.
And I'll share just quickly a small story of just what happened yesterday. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and she had a loss 2 years ago, a young man that she calls brother. And she gets very, very sad. And even I'm a therapist, I do youth development work. I missed how deeply sad she was by the loss of this young man. And so at her high school, which is a small white high school on the side of the mountain, she expressed this that she had grief and she misses her brother. And so her school counselor set up an altar for her in her locker. And it
Mhm.
was a small action that had profound impact emotionally on my daughter. It allowed her to be able to experience her grief while being in school and be able to transition back to learning, right? To not get angry and want to go fight, but have a place in her locker where she can open up her locker and see some altar items. And it's like a candle. She printed out a picture of the young man. She put some fake rose petals. I mean, it's beautiful. So don't ever think that a small action like that can't have profound impact.
Thank you for sharing that story. And I love the wisdom that is being surfaced in the chat. Oftentimes, as caretakers, as service providers, we care at the expense of ourselves, right? And both, our own wellness, our own care, our own psychological and emotional safety, even physical, is at risk. Um, or not thought about as we're caring for others. So many of us do this work because we have a deep, deep passion, commitment, sense of responsibility to justice, to challenging the systems that are harming our people, to harming humanity and communities. And so I think about the culture of our organizations that really don't allow for the slowing down and the noticing of how that is impacting us, to wade through so much global, community, interpersonal, personal grief, and not being able to express it, heal through it, be in community with it. We need the right ingredients to become the medicine, right? The pathway, the seed, the potential, all of that is within us, right? But if we do not have the soil, the sunlight, the care, the sweet words spoken to us, right? Then that is not actualized. Thank you for sharing that.
All right. Thank you so much, Oriana, for inviting folks to share and all the wisdom that's coming in the chat. Please, please continue to share. I believe we are the medicine we seek. We have everything we need within us. So we're just going to take a minute and invite you to pause and reflect. We want you to look at this list of values that we've shared, and this is from Brene Brown. Shout out to Brene Brown and all of her wisdom. We want you to think about these values. Which one of these values speaks to you the most, right? And how do these values influence your practice? So much of our life, especially when we are centered on the trauma, it just goes. We don't really take a minute to stop, pause, and reflect, and to actually think about what we have experienced, what we are experiencing, and what we want to experience. I know for me, parenting was an example of that. I had children, I'm a single mom, and when I had children, I was really intentional in my pregnancies to like take a minute to think. Like I'm 50, 51. And so as a child, I was hit. My parents used corporal punishment as a way to discipline their children. It was their choice. It was a learned and inherited behavior, but it was the norm. And so when I got pregnant, I said, you know what? I actually don't want to hit my children as a way to get them to listen to me. And I had to take time to think about that so that I could have a different practice. So please reflect on this list. You're welcome to share it in the chat. You're welcome also to just track it as you are thinking about what you value most and how those values show up in what you do. So, taking a moment to think about it, like for me, love is very, very important. I value feeling loved and being loving. And how do I become loving and be loving when I'm upset or when I am exhausted? Am I still able to sit with a young person who is in the foster care and express love, even if when I'm frustrated with my agency, even when I'm mad at my partner, even when I haven't slept? Right? So, how do the things you value show up in your practice? Someone said curiosity. Yes. As a therapist, we should all be curious, right? We can't assume we know people's stories. We need to be asking questions. Someone else said integrity. What does it mean to move from a place of principled integrity, right? And equity. How do we create equity and connection? All of these values are very, very important. and should be informing how you do your work. Some organizations have organizational values, and then sometimes you work at organizations and they're not living up to the values. But it's a great reference point for you to come back to and say, wait a minute, what is it that we value here? And how can we move from that place? How are we not just doing what we're doing, but we're constantly reflecting on our practice and how it's rooted? Absolutely, Arturo. Thank you for that. So many of our clients, because of the trauma that they have experienced, have a difficult time recognizing their value and their worth. And so, for some of us as clinicians, that's our job, just to make them know that they're worthy of people being present for them, people being loving towards them, and people valuing their presence. Very, very important. This is wonderful. We'll take a couple more and then we'll go to the next slide. Yes, Latanya. Yes, the work is also for us, right? I have that issue myself. Absolutely. There's also a way in when we value others in a certain way, we also have to look at ourselves. So we will be amplifying your lived experiences and what you bring and how that shows up in what you practice. Because my grandma used to say, you can't give what you don't have, right? And so this notion of doing work for others also requires us to do work on self. Absolutely, Erin. Thank you so much for sharing that. But let's talk a little bit about our ecosystem and how it is relational. And actually, Oriana, I think this is your slide.
Yeah, we can hold it together. I mean, what we wanted to really uplift in sharing this beautiful public health framework here is that who we are in this moment, how we relate to the work that we do is so deeply, deeply influenced by who we are, who we've been in our lifetime, who and what we've experienced, and not just in our lifetime, but for generations past. Like just as we carry the medicine and just as we carry the trauma, we carry also the values within us. And so we wanted to uplift this way of looking at strengths within a community, values within a community, and also challenges and barriers within a community. So many of us are already familiar with this. Many of us, maybe this guides our work already. But the medical model, the Western capitalist model is going straight to the problem and only addressing the problem where the problem is presenting. And this is a much more holistic and successful way of looking at the ills in our community, the misalignments in our community. And so we ask us to think about the power, the experience, the values, the connection or lack of connection that exists on an individual and interpersonal level, as well as within our communities. So we're looking at it relationally, we're looking at our values, how they've developed, how they show up, interpersonally and relationally, as well as how they exist, how they are in relation to our community, systems and institutions, and just as important, history and legacy. So invite you to share what in the chat, what comes to mind when you're thinking about your values, how you relate to your work in this moment, and the realms of influence that impact how you are showing up in this moment, how you are experiencing this moment. Yeah, and so we welcome you to share in the chat what surfaces for you, what wondering and curiosity arises, right? So continue to welcome that in the chat. We also wanted to take a moment to think about it in the form of a collective journal. And so in just a moment, a link will be dropped into the chat, and that link will bring you to a Google Doc. This is completely anonymous, and you will see once you click on the Google Doc, once you click on the Google Doc, you will see in the header prompt 1 and prompt 2. So we ask you to just think about prompt 1 at this moment, and you can find a place within the Google Doc to begin writing. There's really no wrong way to relate to the questions that we have here. You can do a stream of consciousness, you can do bullet points, you can find images to drop into the Google Doc, or you can journal in a more traditional way. But we're asking folks to think about, where do you see your values affirmed in your workplace? Where do you feel challenged when trying to maintain your values within your organization? And what could be strengthened or added to support further alignment between your personal values, your organization, and the actual work that you're able to do? These are big questions, so you can answer all 3 of them at once. You can just go to the question that you feel gravitated towards, and we'll spend about 6 minutes journaling. Are
Please
there?
don't, I was going to say, please don't worry about misspellings. Please don't worry about it making sense to anyone else. Just like when you journal yourself, you're just getting it out. And this is just a process that we do together. So don't worry about those things. What's important is not how we're saying it, but what we're saying.
Yeah, are there any questions? You can unmute or share them in the chat before moving into a quiet 5 or 6 minutes to journal.
I do see that someone can't access the Google Doc due to company website blocks. Are we going to be sending out maybe the slides or links that folks can use later? Ashley, is that something we're able to do?
Yes, we will send out the slides after this session.
Okay, so you'll get the slides and we'll make sure to insert the collective journal activity as a doc, and then maybe you're able to open it up on your personal email or your personal.
Yeah, and feel free to just jot it down on a piece of paper right now. If the doc is not accessible to you, we'll leave the questions up right now. And I just see in the chat, someone mentioned kind of getting lost in the big picture of the ecological model, and I think that's okay. Oftentimes we're not looking at the big picture, and that's one of the impacts of trauma is that we look just at what's right in front of us and not at the larger picture. And so I hope it's not overwhelming to look at the larger picture, but and that you welcome it. So the prompt is in the chat, the Google Doc is in the chat, and you can also see the prompt on the slides. And
This collective journal process is kind of like a intellectual visioning process, right? So even if there's an area where you're not experiencing these values affirmed right now, you actually speaking to them, documenting them, gives energy towards it actually coming into existence, right? And so these are some of the visions we're holding for our work and for our places of work and for ourselves. So thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this. Got about what, 2 more minutes, Oriana?
3. Mhm. Take about a minute and a half more to finish up your thought.
Thank you, Joanne, for your tech support. We appreciate you.
Yeah. If you feel like you've completed a thought, you can highlight a portion of it. There'll be space in just a second to speak to the essence of what came up for you, to read part of what you wrote, or to speak to it out loud verbally. So just want to let folks know that that's coming up in about 34 seconds. All right, so I'm paraphrasing. I don't know the words verbatim, but Audre Lorde, the great Audre Lorde, said, you know, if we don't define for ourselves who we are, then we will be defined by others. And so what I have found personally and through what I've read, taking the opportunity to really root into our purpose and our values is a protective factor. It supports sustainability. It supports us finding the folks within our community that support us in sustaining the work that we do and building true comradeship. And it really improves the work that we're doing when we're able to name, uplift, and root into our values. And so since I'm sharing my slides, I can't see what people wrote in the collective journal, but we want to open it up for folks to unmute and speak to what you wrote. And anyone feels brave enough to, or
I do.
right on. Thank you, DeAndre.
Deidre.
Deidre, sorry. Thank you.
Okay. So my name is Deidre, and I work for a very wonderful company who in terms values the work I do along with my lived experience. I don't think there's ever a day that I actually came to work and didn't feel valued. Although I do agree that we are there to value the people that we serve, you still have to be able to understand that the company understands. Well, I don't know if everybody in here is a CPS, but I am. And I have I've been a CPS for the past 17 years. So it's really validating to me to challenge myself to continue to move forward. I just became a QPR instructor. Um, if anybody knows what that is, I actually finished it, and now I'm a national instructor, so I feel pretty good. That's my little story.
Beautiful. Congratulations. And I believe that, you know, we all benefit from the role that you're holding and the wisdom that you hold. It's so true that when you feel valued and witnessed, seen within your organization, that the work that you do reverberates that, and you're able to create that experience for the people that you're supporting.
Thank you.
Mhm. We'd love to hear from a few more folks if you're willing to unmute and share what surfaced for you in reflection to these questions.
Good afternoon. I can remember being in college and one of my professors saying to us, if we were there so that people would appreciate us, that we were in the wrong profession. So I always took that to heart, and I was a little confused by it at first. And then I realized that me healing myself and being healed was the only way. Let me shut my door. There's a lot of background noise. I apologize. And so I'm sorry.
No worries.
Healing myself was first and foremost, and protecting my healing, and also being able to bring that lived experience into what it is that I do puts me in a position to be reciprocal in listening and allowing individuals to be heard, as opposed to listening as a tool to fix. Listening to allow the person to share and then hear their own healing as a possibility. So that's one of the things that I lead with in interacting, and it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, but my focus is not on the environment that others are sharing space in, but the environment that I'm creating for the consumers that are sharing space with me.
Karen, I really appreciate what you shared because there's cultural and historical implications to you prioritizing yourself as a service provider, right? So I'm a 51-year-old Black woman. My mother was a nurse. She's now retired and in her mid 70s. And she's someone that we talk a lot about. What does it mean to have self-care, right? What does it mean to care for self? Knowing that in our field, so many of us experience burnout, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and just the act of being there for others means for a lot of us culturally and historically that we don't care for self, right? That we are like the wounded healer, we are the broken down doctor, right? We are the one, and that we, for some reason, we've been taught that like we should be okay with that because we have a job or because we're 51 or because we have a college degree. And so there's a shift that folks are sharing where they're trying to talk about how do we create a balance. So one of my tools that I use when I work with girls, and I work specifically with girls that have experienced gender-based violence. I'll just say we haven't really talked about gender-based violence and boys, the number of boys and men that have experienced sexual assault. But working with girls in those communities, one of the ways that I kind of determine if it's appropriate for me to bring myself into the conversation is I only share things that I've already processed through. Because what I don't want is my client to then have to care for me and my stuff. I'm using my lived experience as a model, as an example for someone to actually heal, right? And for me, I have a toolkit like all of us where I have certain strategies and certain ways that I do that. And so, how do I balance out what I need and balance out what someone else needs? It's a constant, ongoing question, and it does have historical and cultural implications because we have inherited certain ways of being and certain ways of thinking. So thank you so much for sharing that. The importance of that, um, it comes up in our work.
May I
I like
compliment
to
what you
piggyback,
just said also?
Please, yes.
Just in support, one of the things that I look at is the fact that our ancestors have already weathered too many storms and shown us the way. For us to choose to weather the same storms. So, what I do is I look at my life experiences and the experience of my ancestors almost like an umbrella. And what I want people to do is to allow me to not shield them, but show them where there is support and respite from the storm
Mhm.
so that they in turn have the same tools and choose not to be in this and choose not to bring their children or their family or their communities into that same storm. So for me, it's very much rooted in being connected to my ancestors and being able to draw strength, but more importantly, wisdom from the path that they have already walked, and making sure that that's the narrative that I am bringing forward. Because if we allow others to continue to create the narrative that we are expected to dwell in, we will all dwell in failure and stay weathered. And I choose not to be weathered.
I'd like to piggyback off what Karen has been saying. Um, I really feel like it resonates with me to meet people where they are at. I think that is the number one goal as an advocate is to take yourself out of the equation and put them in and be the ears for them. So many people feel unheard. So many people feel unseen. We are the ones to see them, to hear them, and to help propel and project their voice. I think it's incredibly important that during those times we're setting ourselves aside, but also going off of shared experience. There's something incredibly powerful of hearing, you know what, me too. Me too. I've been there, I've seen that. Me too. And not and sharing in a way where it's not trying to one up. I'm not here to one up you and say my experience was worse than yours. I'm here to say me too. I get you. We're mind meshing right now because I get you. I've been low
and I know what low feels like. I don't know what your low feels like, but I know what my low felt like, and I have a similar situation, and I get you. I hear you, I see you, I feel you. And I think at those times, those are not times where we put ourselves first. Those, our participants, our clients should be first during those times. And that's where the compassion fatigue comes in, because after a day of doing that for everybody, you come home and your kids want all of the mama, all of you. And you're like, I can't do it for one more person. Give me a minute. And I think that is the biggest challenge for us, is so many of us that do this are so compassionate, and we care. We care that others aren't heard, and we want to fill that void for them. And then we get home and it's our families that kind of suffer because we are burnt at the end of the day, absolutely drained and empty. So self-care is the best that I can do. And sometimes that's not enough, and sometimes it is enough. And I think self-care is incredibly important. So I try to, every mom, what are you doing for yourself? Every dad, what are you doing for yourself? Every person I encounter, man, you had a hard day. What are you going to do to reward yourself for getting to the end today? And I always end my sessions with my clients with that exact question. Today was a hard day. You talked about some hard things. You're going to reward yourself for that. And that's my piece.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, we cannot provide the services that we hope to, that we feel so deeply committed to providing, if we're not caring for ourselves. And as what has been said here, if we're not healing our own traumas, if we're not doing our own work to find regulation, perspective, and healing as a result to our experiences. Rachel Rahman says a few things that I think are so powerful for this conversation here, that when we see the world as broken or as our role to fix, then we're walking around with a hammer, like we're to fix, you know, and the world doesn't need a hammer. Our young folks don't need a hammer, and we don't need to be constantly engaged in that heavy lifting work. And then the other thing that she says in other work is that we can see our role as a helper, or our work as in service. And in service is more of this partnership where we're not doing the heavy lifting, but that we are witnessing, we are posing the question, we are sharing our own experience intentionally, and not healing our own trauma through our relationship with our clients and the people that we serve. This is so rich. I could stay in this conversation for a really long time. Let's hold on to it. We're holding on to it. We're gonna continue to share the words, the feelings, the wisdom that is surfacing for us as we move into this framework. And so much of the work that we do is can be, if we're not intentional, if we're not in organizations that were uplifted in this past sharing, that are transactional, we're employing, as Taj James here in this quote is also employing, this shift to humanify, to create a more humanizing culture, relationships, and way of seeing ourselves in the work that we're doing. So he says, don't thingify, humanify. Shift your way of being, shifting our way of being, is our tangible outcome. Systems change comes from big groups making big shifts of being. And so we're going to uplift some tiny shifts that create big shifts in just a second. So I'm going to hand it back over to Falilah.
All right, y'all. Just want to acknowledge that we have been on this call coming up to an hour. So if you have been sitting this whole time, move your shoulders, shake your hands, move your toes. As we are getting into understanding and building on trauma-informed care, we know that a lot of our work is rooted in this theoretical approach. I'm not going to go through all of this because I'm making an assumption that just that you are here and do the work you do, that you have an understanding of what trauma-informed care is. One that I want to lift up that always spoke to my heart was this idea of how do we resist re-traumatizing folks? right? Like if we are trauma informed, there's elements to it, but this piece about if I'm a trauma informed practitioner, then I'm not re-traumatizing folks. I've had to learn this the hard way in the work that I've done, primarily with girls that have been part of the underground street economy, the foster care system, and the juvenile justice system. There was a way in which some of our practices early on were actually causing more trauma, right? And as we begin to look at how we provided our service, to look at this idea of trauma informed. And there's some key principles. Again, I'm not going to read through this slide. You'll get the slide and you're welcome to read more about trauma informed care. But healing centered engagement is really rooted on trauma informed care. So we can go to the next slide. This next slide allows us to pivot towards healing. And so I'll read this quote from a brother named Dr. Sean Jenwright, who I know personally and have worked with for years in the Bay Area. And this is what it says: we need a fundamental shift in our values, a pivot in how we think, connect, act, and work. A pivot acknowledges collective harm and individual injury, but also leans into the future and opens entirely new possibilities. So when I acknowledge that I, as someone that was working on behalf of folks in the juvenile justice system, was also causing them harm and injury, when I was able to acknowledge that as the service provider and say, wait a minute, there's another way of being. Please forgive me, right? I'm from this culture. I'm from this society too. I have this intent in my heart to support you and help you shift and grow. But I can also recognize the impact of my actions, of my words, and I am shifting and growing. And there are infinite possibilities and ways that we can be. This very slight pivot, this one piece of self accountability has tremendous impact. And for some of the folks we serve, when we do that, it might be the first time that an adult or someone in a power position has ever acknowledged their impact. It can be mind blowing for some of the folks. So let's continue to pivot towards healing and let's go a little deeper, right? When we are trauma reactive, here's some of the feelings that we may experience. We don't feel safety. We feel overwhelmed. We're driven by fear, right? Some of us shut down and become numb. This is how we are when we are reacting to trauma, right? There have been times within agencies where a young woman, and I worked on behalf of commercially sexually exploited children, after they were assaulted, they would come to our office before they would go to the police or go home. They would literally, one day, a young woman came in the office in a t-shirt. She was only wearing a t-shirt, no shoes, nothing else. She had just been assaulted at a bus stop. And she came in the office, and as she was sharing what happened to her, my mind started to spin. And I literally had to sit down. I had learned enough by that point to know that I don't make a decision when I'm still in the process of responding or reacting to trauma, that I don't make any decisions. I just sat down and asked her to sit down. She still was telling her story. She still was going through all of her psychosomatic reactions to being assaulted. But I just took a moment with her and just sat down because I knew that any decision or offering that I would share with her in that moment were coming out of trauma. So, trauma informed obviously is a strategy and a theory that wants us to resist reharming folks, wants us to recognize what's happening socially and culturally, wants us to realize the impact of it, right? And how widespread it is, wants us to recognize its effects and respond, right? And that's beautiful. I'm not knocking trauma informed, but as a field, we're going now into healing and wellness. And when you think about an agency that has healing as one of their core values, it becomes a place that feels more collaborative, to Oriana's point about the partnership. It's centered in relationships and connection, right? The idea is not just about the trauma. The trauma isn't just the focus. Yes, we deal with the trauma, but we also deal with the joy. We also deal with the strength. When you have a healing organization, it's flexible. It can adapt to what's happening, right? And it also has a value around equity and folks being included. And so, what does it mean for us as staff, but also for our clients, and then also for the system of leadership? Healing centered engagement, some folks talk about it from three perspectives. They'll talk about it for the individual, for the interpersonal relationship, and then for the institution as well. So, healing is centered in all three of those aspects. It's not just for the client. It's not just for the institution, but it's for all the layers that that are part of being with people and providing service. Yes, this is a beautiful slide. We're very grateful to be able to share this with you. So when we think about trauma-informed care, just as we're thinking about how they are different, we know that trauma-informed care has certain practicalities. That it's about the individual as opposed to with healing centered, it's about the collective, right? For trauma-informed care, we're looking at the internal. What's happening internally? How sad are you? How depressed are you? How heavy is what you're carrying? In healing centered, we look at the environment. For some of us right now, what's happening in Palestine and in Gaza, while we're not living there personally, we may have friends and family who are Palestinian. We may have friends and family are who are Jewish as well. And just knowing that that's happening in our environment and it's affecting people causes us a level of sadness, a level of irritability. Healing centered engagement wants service providers to bring that into the institution, wants us to think about what's happening in the environment and how important that is and how that impacts. Trauma informed care looks at the pathology. What are the problems? What is the history? What is the diagnosis? Where healing centered really looks at the possibilities, right? Like, what are the infinite possibilities? Not just how were you diagnosed and what is the problem? So, healing centered approach comes from the idea that people are not harmed in a vacuum. There's nothing someone did to cause their harm. And well being comes from participating and transforming the root causes of the harm within the institutions. And when we have a society that causes less harm, we'll have individuals that are less harmed and we'll have a more joyful and healthy environment. Next slide. I love that quote. So we're going to take a moment to look at the karma principles that are rooted in the healing-centered engagement. And I say karma, C-A-R-M-A. So we start first with culture. How do we have restorative conversations about identity? Again, who we are, right? Secondly, looking at agency. How do we develop the agency of the people we're serving? Right? How do we encourage them to be able to speak up to what they need? And they can say, Miss Aisha, no, I don't want to come to your office. Can you meet me at a park? And can we do our session in a park? How do we foster that agency within them? Thirdly, relationships. Healing centered engagement knows that in order for folks to be vulnerable and empathetic, you have to have a relationship. I'm finding that in my work that I do, I get out of saying this is a safe place. It's not safe to talk about things that have harmed us. Now, this may be a brave space, a vulnerable place, but I don't know if this is a safe place, which is something we've been saying for years, right? 4, meaning. What does it look like to remember your purpose and to engage in service that helps folks find their purpose? Very, very important in terms of just as a human beings, us having a life that is rooted in our purpose. And then lastly, to the point around infinite possibilities, aspirations. So how is your healing center service provision based in creating infinite possibilities for the folks you serve? And here are some questions you'll see on the slide, some deeper inquiries. As you get into healing centered, one of the things I love about it is that it kind of feeds into itself. So you can continue to go deeper. It's not explicitly political. It is explicitly political, excuse me. It's not clinical, right? We see people as people, not as problems, right? It's grounded in healing, but also in this idea that we can restore identity. We can help people find out who they are, and that process is a sacred and beautiful process. It's driven and based in the assets, what we want, not necessarily what we don't want. It's supportive of us being able to heal, and we'll talk more in this training about our own self-care. And then it asks the questions of who are you and what is right with you and what is right with your community. The things you focus on are the things you magnify. So Healing Center really looks at those strengths. It looks at assets. It's not about what happened to you. Thank you, Oriana. It's not about what happened to you. It's more about what's happening to us and who we are even in the face of those things. Infinite possibilities, right? So very, very, very important. Thank you so much. Next slide. So we're going to take a moment to, when we think about Healing Center, they have some pivots. There's some core pivots that are part of Healing Centered engagement theory. And as we reimagine how we impact the people we serve and reimagine ourselves within healing centered engagement, you go from your awareness is from lens to mirror. So it's not about us looking through a lens at those people who have all these problems. It's about creating a mirror. So we're together looking in a mirror, right? For myself, I was the work. I, I was one of those little Black girls from these neighborhoods that people missed. So I never really had the experience or perspective when I went to get my graduate degree in drama therapy, that I was looking outward to someone else. It was always this mirror. When you are the work, it's hard for you to disassociate yourself from that. So your awareness changes. Healing Centered is rooted in this idea of connection. You go from having transactional relationships to transformative relationships, right? I don't even have to say nothing about that because y'all understand the difference between a transaction and a transformation. Healing Center looks at the vision, right? This idea again about infinite possibilities. It isn't about fixing a problem. It isn't about saying, oh, you have depression. We're going to fix this problem, but we're actually going to create possibilities. And then lastly, in terms of how you provide your service provision, how it feels for you and others, it's about your presence. So you go from this hustle, this bustle, this movement, this active, this we got to do this, we got to let the judge know, we got to call the attorney, to actually getting into a flow. And so the energetic exchange that happens is not something that is from this thing of hustle, 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 go, 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 go. It's something that is rooted, that is grounded, and that is provided from a place of flow. And sometimes you may not have as many outcomes. You may not have as many goals, right? But this goal around how do we center wellness is something that's so big. And what I found is that actually for healing centered organizations, there's actually more progress. I know for me personally, as chief of staff, we do a 4-day work week at my organization, and I get more done in those 4 days than I did in the 5 days, y'all, because I have more time to rest and care for myself. So I can get on Monday and I'm knocking all kind of stuff out. There's all this research that shows that human beings are more productive when they're well rested, when they're cared for, and actually the productivity increases. So this is a very beautiful and wonderful time to be alive as we are looking at reimagining our impact and reimagining ourselves. Thank you. So we are going to move into some small group discussions, just really quickly in transparent facilitation. Oriana, I have a question just about time. I know we have a break coming, and I'm wondering if we want to break before going into small group discussions, just in terms of time and folks being on for at least an hour now.
Yeah, why don't we take a can we take a 3-minute break and then come back into groups? So
Okay. Just wanted to check in with you about that, just to be aware of just the body looking at a screen. So we'll take a 3-minute break, y'all, and then we'll come back. Thank you so much. We're going to play some music for you to enjoy during the break.
so at 10:41 we'll return and go into small breakout groups.
Okay, great.
It looks like folks are going to trickle back into the space now. We're so sorry if anyone got cut off mid-sentence. We want to provide an opportunity for the conversation that took place in your small groups to surface and to emerge here in this larger group. So just, ask that you, if you do share, and we hope that you share, that you're sharing for yourself and you're not sharing what your small group members shared. But what are the pivots that are resonating with you after being in conversation? And how might that impact your experience, your wellness, and the work that you do? I'm going to say all that again because I think people are still coming back in. Welcome back from your small group conversation. I invite you to big up, to share an appreciation in the chat for people you were in conversation with. Apologies if you were cut off mid-sentence. We want to provide some opportunity to bring the smaller conversation into this larger space. And so please only share for yourself. You can share the essence of what was talked about, but don't share the experience of anyone else that was in your group. And yeah, what pivots are resonating with you? I see a hand. I hope I'm saying your name right, Sierra.
Yes.
Yes.
So, hi everyone. My name is Tiara. I'm in New York, Albany, New York, and I work for the New York State Office of Mental Health. And I'll stick to the I. So, what was really challenging in the group for me, it was just me and one other person, and was this definition of pivot. So, it was really hard to even engage in the conversation because we didn't necessarily understand what you all meant by pivot. And I understand the difference between trauma-informed care and healing-centered engagement, and what pivot do you need to make within your value system to get to a more healing centered space. But that's the only thing that I was able to gather. So our conversation went into our current places of employment and how we're prioritizing wellness and self-care. So, and we talked about the importance of rest. And I see that you all have information from the NAP ministry. So we talked a little bit about that. So if when time permits, after like sharing, if we could talk a little bit more about pivot and what that means, because we were kind of lost.
Yeah, absolutely. We can do that now. When I think of a pivot, it's it's one step in a different direction. And when you take 10 steps in that new direction, you're in a completely different place. It can feel incredibly overwhelming to think about, creating a brand new, entirely different structure when you're in the work. But taking a pivot, a small turn in a different direction, can feel much more manageable and accessible to folks. And so that's integrating an example. We're already meeting. We're not going to stop the meeting, but maybe we start it with 3 minutes of mindfulness, right? That's a small pivot to support the mirror, right? Or that we allow room for dyad and for meaningful conversation amongst one another in staff development rather than being spoken to or at the entire time. So those are examples of small pivots that support those reframes or the shifts in ways of looking at the work that we're engaged in. And Aisha knows so much more. Let me speak to it in a deeper way as well.
Sometimes, like organizationally, it might happen like in staff meetings. We start with a check-in as opposed to just jumping right into the work, right? We might think about if we have some type of goals that are set through your agency where your service provision goes, you may be constantly thinking about reducing those goals so that you can really be present. So you go from hustle to flow working with the client as opposed to the hustle and bustle. We're going to do this, do this, do this. Or we're going to do these 3 things really, really well. We're going to spend the time that is necessary to actually pivot from just moving and moving to actually grounding and shifting. So it can be really small, like a check-in process or like a staff appreciation box that lives in the office kitchen where every day you can put in little notes to appreciate folks, right? And then at the staff meeting, you start your meeting or you end your meeting with things like that. It can be something small, something that feels small, and then it could be also be something larger for example, at organizations I've worked at, in terms of institutional pivots, things like allowing people to choose their holidays. So you get a certain set of federal holidays, and then you give every staff person 3 holidays a year, paid holidays, that they get to choose for their birthday or their kid's first day of school, right? Things like that that you can implement institutionally that actually center the wellness and self-care of your staff as well. We have a day at my job, and I just had to use it this week because my daughter got into a fight. That's a parent day. And so one day a year, you get a paid day where just something comes up as a parent that you need to do. You don't have to use your vacation or sick time. It's beautiful. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, maybe we can invite one more person to share what surfaced in your small group discussion. It can be a curiosity as the last share or anything. Kayleen.
Aileen, yeah.
Hi everyone. So what I spoke about in our small group was I've recently shifted roles. I was working with transition aged youth. That's how I got involved with and heard about this wonderful organization and got on the listserv and everything. And now I still work for the Yakama Nation, but I moved into working for largely population of elderly and differently abled adults. And I'm a case manager. And a lot of what's challenging about my role in this organization and thinking about the context of what we're learning here today is a lot of the relationship feels transactional, right? Clients call me because they're having an issue with their hours or their care provider. Clients call me because they need DME, right? They need that durable medical equipment. They're calling me for this. And I've got a huge case. I don't have a big caseload because I'm learning, but I have a significant caseload. And I've got to, they're calling me for this. I'm going to try to figure it out for them. And then I got to move to the next one who needs something else from me, right? It feels transactional and less transformational. And I feel like I'm encouraged as an organization kind of standpoint to be very just hustle and bustle. It's much less like in the flow with the client, right? It's like I'm going to go have that home visit, but these are elders and they want to sit and connect with me. And culturally, I want to sit and connect with them too. I want to learn from my elders. I respect them. I just want to talk all day. I want to let them talk. I don't even want to talk. I just want to learn. But I'm needing to get through this 2-hour assessment with them, right? When I might be the first person that they've seen outside of their caregiver in 2 weeks. So trying to find a balance, I think there is something that I'd love to brainstorm with my team and my more senior case managers. And there's an importance in that. And there's a real need for that, especially culturally where we're at. And I can't wait to just share this with them and kind of dive into that deeper and how we can maybe make some pivots in a more healing centered engagement direction for our team.
Thank you. Historically and even presently, so many of us, when we're, trying to acquire something for our wellness, are met with bureaucracy, runaround, walls. And so for you to be a warm, a supportive person that meets their need, that gets them the equipment that they need without exuding so much energy and labor, that's an emotionally corrective experience. That is transformative. And so I just, want you to feel affirmed in that, that it can be these small things, these saying hello. It can be, spacing out the assessment over a number of visits and not just trying to pack it all into a one time. And I know as a therapist, I am really, I try to do that. I'm not going to get through the assessment in the first session. And so we're going to have to end this conversation, but it's not a period or an exclamation mark. It is a comma. It's a ... We have so many offerings this month that support healing-centered engagement, and we really hope that you stay around, that you continue to connect and engage with us through the other programming, and there was so much more that we wanted to get to today. And maybe we'll end with this quote and a deep breath in, and then I'll hand it over to Ashley for closing. So this is bringing the wisdom and words of Audre Lorde back into the space. She said, I had to examine in my dreams as well as in my immune function tests the devastating effects of overextension. Overextending myself is not stretching myself. I had to accept how difficult it is to monitor the difference. Necessary for me is cutting down on sugar, crucial physically, psychologically, sorry, I think as well. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. Right? So leaving us with this idea of radical self-care is that mirror, right? I want to just invite folks to take a deep cleansing breath, to find some spaciousness in your posture. We rub your hands together if you can, find your feet on the ground. And at the top of your inhale, place either palm over either side of your head. Suspend your breath and exhale. One more deep breath, palm at the back of your neck, other palm on heart center. And exhale. We thank you so, so deeply for joining this conversation with us. I'm going to advance our slides over to the part that Ashley is going to hold for our closing.
Thank you so much, Oriana, Falilah. Such good food for the soul. Thank you for bringing it. We'll have to have you guys back. Y'all have to come back so we can finish everything up. We'll make time and space for it. As you all leave today, please be sure to respond to the follow-up survey. We create these trainings based off of what you say that you need to do your job and to feel successful in your work. So please fill out the follow-up survey so we know what we can plan and put together and bring forward and as a training to you all. We appreciate your feedback. You all will receive the slides, you'll receive the recording so you can listen back, share with your colleagues and your partners and your friends and family and whoever you think could really, really learn from this experience. And so with that, we will see you later this month. We have wellness activities throughout the entire month of January. So we look forward to seeing you again soon. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.